My husband raised his champagne glass in front of 12 people and said he would never trust me with $1 because I was too pretty to understand money. Everybody laughed. Not loud, not messy, not the way normal people laugh when something is actually funny. It was the polished kind of laughter rich people use when cruelty is dressed in a tuxedo. A few of his investors chuckled into their glasses. His business partner covered his mouth like he was trying to be polite. The wives smiled in that stiff way women smile when they know another woman is being cut open in public, but they also know their own husband might be next to pick up the knife. My mother-in-law did not bother pretending. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, touched the diamond pendant at her throat, and laughed like she had waited all night for someone to finally say what she believed. She looked at me across the white tablecloth as if I were a stain the housekeeper had missed. Daniel, she said, lifting her wine, I told you years ago. Marry a beautiful woman if you must, but don't expect her to balance a checkbook. Another wave of laughter passed around the table. I sat beside my husband in the private dining room of Arthur Whitman's penthouse on the 48th floor in Manhattan, wearing a navy dress Daniel had chosen because it made me look quietly expensive. Through the glass wall behind Arthur, the city burned with light. Millions of windows. Millions of lives. People arguing, cooking, kissing, crying, working late, trying to make rent, trying to survive. Down there, maybe somebody was being loved correctly. Up here, I could barely breathe without asking permission. Daniel put his hand on the small of my back. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate. To me, it felt like a lock clicking shut. Claire is wonderful at making a room feel warm, he continued, smiling at the table. She can pick flowers, candles, wallpaper, whatever you want. But contracts? Please. Last month she stared at our utility bill for 30 minutes like it was written in Mandarin. The men laughed harder. I looked down at my plate. The sea base had gone cold. A perfect lemon wedge sat beside it like decoration in a magazine. My fork rested exactly where I had set it 20 minutes earlier. I had learned, over 3 years of marriage, that the less I moved when Daniel mocked me, the faster the moment passed. At least, that was what I used to believe. 3 years. That was how long I had listened to versions of the same joke. Claire doesn't understand investments. Claire gets confused by numbers. Claire is lucky Daniel handles everything. Claire is sweet, but she is not built for business. At the beginning, I laughed with everyone. I told myself it was harmless. A confident wife could take a joke. A good wife did not embarrass her husband in front of important people. A smart wife knew when to let a man perform. But somewhere between the first joke and the 100th, I stopped laughing. Then I stopped defending myself. Then, without meaning to, I taught everyone in Daniel's world that my silence was permission. His mother learned it fastest. Evelyn Kavanaugh had old money manners without old money grace. Her family name was on hospital wings and museum donor walls, and she carried that history like a weapon. From the beginning, she had treated me like Daniel had brought home a stray he found outside a country club. My father had been a public school math teacher in Ohio. My mother had worked at a dental office. I got scholarships, worked part-time, and moved to New York at 24 with 2 suitcases and a notebook full of plans. None of that mattered to Evelyn. To her, I was not poor enough to be inspiring or rich enough to be useful. I was just inconvenient. She's pretty, I once heard her say to Daniel before our wedding. But make sure the paperwork is airtight. Back then, I thought she meant the prenup. I was wrong. Honestly, Daniel said, warming to the room, if Claire managed the Seabright Key budget, we'd be selling hot dogs on the beach by August. That was the project everyone had gathered to celebrate. Seabright Key. A luxury waterfront development in the Florida Keys with private villas, a members-only marina, wellness club, and enough glossy renderings to make investors forget the ocean was not furniture they could rearrange. Daniel had spent 18 months chasing capital for it. Tonight was supposed to be his victory lap. Arthur Whitman, the host of the dinner, was the one person in the room Daniel never mocked. Arthur had white hair, calm eyes, and the kind of quiet power that made loud men lower their voices. His family office controlled money across real estate, energy, hotels, and private equity. Daniel needed Arthur's approval because Arthur's investment arm, Whitman Strategic Partners, held the decisive vote in a trust tied to Seabright Key. Daniel loved saying that I did not understand money, but for 2 months I had been reading the papers he left behind. Not stealing. Not snooping exactly. Reading. Drafts in the recycling bin. Printed emails forgotten in the library. Environmental reports left open on his tablet when he took calls in the hallway. Budget revisions with numbers circled in red. I had seen enough to understand that Seabright Key was not as clean as he claimed. There were missing coastal impact approvals. There were projected overruns hidden in contingency language. There were community access issues Daniel dismissed as local noise. There was a memo from a consultant warning that if construction started before the review was complete, delays could cost the project at least $27 million. I knew because I had read every page. Slowly. Carefully. The way Daniel loved to joke that I read everything. Arthur set his wine glass down. Daniel, tell us about the marina approvals. I heard there were some timing questions. Daniel leaned back. Relaxed and golden under the chandelier. Nothing serious. Standard regulatory friction. The kind of thing people panic about when they don't know how development works. His hand pressed more firmly against my back. A warning. I kept my face still. He turned to me with a grin. Claire, honey, regulatory friction means boring paperwork. Don't worry. Another laugh. I felt something inside me shift. Not explode. Not yet. It was smaller than that. Cleaner. Like a thread snapping. Daniel's brother Mark lifted his glass. To Daniel, the only man brave enough to build paradise and marry a woman who thinks Excel is a brand of gum. The table broke open. Evelyn actually clapped. My face burned. Not because the joke hurt more than the others. Because, for the first time, I saw the whole room clearly. These were not people accidentally misunderstanding me. They were enjoying the version of me Daniel had sold them. A harmless little wife. A decorative wife. A woman too soft to threaten anyone's money. 3 weeks before that dinner, Daniel had slid a postnuptial agreement across our kitchen island while I was making coffee. Just housekeeping, he said. The document was 42 pages long. You already signed a prenup, I said. This is different. Cleaner. Things have changed with the company. What things? He smiled that patient, condescending smile that made me feel 7 years old. Claire, don't turn this into a federal case. It just protects both of us. Can I have a lawyer look at it? His smile thinned. Why would you need a lawyer? I'm your husband. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was loving. Because it sounded like a threat wearing a wedding ring. I read the document anyway. I read it slowly. It would have stripped me of indirect claims to future assets, given Daniel broad management authority over marital funds, and created language that could let him control money I inherited or received through trusts. When I told him I would not sign without independent counsel, he kissed my forehead in front of the refrigerator and said, "You're making yourself look paranoid." After that, the jokes got sharper. Tonight, they had become knives. Arthur's wife, Patricia, leaned toward me kindly, maybe trying to rescue the table. Claire, how are you liking the city this time of year? Before I could answer, Daniel cut in. She loves it. As long as nobody asks her to calculate the taxi fare. More laughter. I finally looked up. Daniel noticed. His eyes flicked toward me, cold for half a second. Then warm again for the audience. What? He said softly. It's a joke. I heard myself answer, I know. The table quieted just a little. Daniel's thumb pressed into my spine. Then the private elevator chimed. Every head turned. The doors slid open, and a man in a charcoal suit stepped into the room carrying a black leather portfolio. He was about 60, with silver hair, rimless glasses, and the expression of someone who had walked into uncomfortable rooms for a living. He did not look lost. He did not look impressed by the penthouse. He looked directly at me. Mrs. Claire Bennett Kavanaugh? Daniel frowned. Who are you? The man did not answer him. He walked to my side of the table and stopped with a polite nod. My name is Robert Hayes, with Hayes, Marlowe and Finch. I apologize for interrupting your evening, Mrs. Kavanaugh, but I was instructed to deliver this to you. Personally, in the presence of witnesses. He placed a thick cream envelope beside my untouched plate. My maiden name was printed across the front. Claire Bennett. Not Claire Kavanaugh. My heartbeat began to climb. Daniel laughed once, too loud. This is not a good time. Mr. Hayes looked at him then, briefly. I'm afraid the timing was specified. By whom? By Mrs. Eleanor Bennett. The room became still. My grandmother. For a moment, the penthouse vanished. I saw her little brick house in Dayton. The porch swing with chipped blue paint. The tomato plants tied to wooden stakes. Her old cardigan with missing buttons. The woman who drove a 15-year-old Buick, bought cereal with coupons, and told me rich people were often loud because they were afraid silence would expose them. Eleanor died 4 years ago. I said. Mr. Hayes nodded. She did. But certain assets were structured for delayed liquidation. The final transaction closed this afternoon. He opened the portfolio and placed a packet in front of me. There is a bank confirmation inside, along with trust instruments and a letter. As of 6:12 p.m. Eastern Time, $99 million has been transferred into an account legally belonging to you. Nobody laughed. Not one person. Daniel's hand slid off my back. Evelyn's lips parted. Mark whispered, "What the hell?" Daniel stood halfway from his chair. There must be a mistake. My wife does not have $99 million. Mr. Hayes looked at him calmly. She did not before dinner. She does now. I stared at the number until it blurred. $99 million. A number so large it did not feel like money. It felt like a door. Daniel reached toward the packet. Let me see that. I put my hand over the papers before he touched them. The room noticed. So did Daniel. His face changed in a way only I could recognize. Still handsome. Still controlled. But his eyes hardened with disbelief, as if a chair had spoken. Claire, he said quietly, don't make this weird. I looked at him. What part? This attitude. Evelyn recovered first, this is absurd. Eleanor Bennett lived in a house worth less than our garage. Mr. Hayes turned a page. Mrs. Bennett lived modestly by choice. Her late husband helped build a regional logistics company. She sold her stake privately in the early 1990s, moved the proceeds through managed funds, and became a silent founding participant in several investment partnerships. Arthur Whitman slowly leaned forward. Which partnerships? Mr. Hayes looked at me, not Arthur. Mrs. Kavanaugh may disclose that if she wishes. I did not know what to say. All my life, Grandma Ellie had seemed careful, not rich. She clipped coupons, fixed her own curtains, reused jars, and made me write budgets in pencil when I was 14. She never talked about wealth. She talked about choices. She talked about leverage. She told me that a person who does not understand her own numbers is walking through life with a blindfold on. I thought she meant grocery money. Daniel forced a smile. Honey, this is wonderful. Truly. We'll go through it together tomorrow. Together. The same word he had used when he wanted me to sign away my future. I turned my head toward him. Together? He spread his hands, performing warmth. We're married. 20 minutes ago you said you wouldn't trust me with $1. A few people looked down. Daniel's jaw tightened. That was clearly a joke. Then it shouldn't bother you if I handle this without you. Evelyn set her glass down so sharply the wine jumped. Young lady, do not let a number confuse you. Large decisions are made as a family. I almost smiled. When Daniel needed a punchline, I wasn't family. I was entertainment. The silence that followed felt better than applause. Mr. Hayes removed another document from his portfolio. There is a second matter. Daniel's eyes cut to him. Mr. Hayes continued, in addition to the cash transfer, Mrs. Bennett left her granddaughter controlling voting authority in the Bennett Strategic Trust. Arthur's expression sharpened. Bennett Strategic Trust? Yes, Mr. Hayes said. The trust holds a major position inside Whitman Strategic Partners. Arthur sat completely still. Patricia whispered. Arthur? He ignored her. His gaze stayed on the attorney. How major? Mr. Hayes answered, major enough that Mrs. Kavanaugh now holds the deciding vote on any investment requiring trust approval. The room shifted around me. Not physically. Socially. I felt it happen. Chairs did not move. Glasses did not clink. But the shape of power in the room changed so fast it made everyone dizzy. Daniel's face went pale beneath his tan. Arthur looked at him. Daniel, Seabright Key requires trust approval tomorrow morning. No one needed Daniel to answer. His silence did it for him. Mark let out a low whistle before Evelyn shot him a look sharp enough to cut paper. Daniel bent toward me, lowering his voice, trying to make the room disappear. Claire, listen to me. You cannot mix personal feelings with business. I opened my clutch. His eyes followed my hand. From inside, I removed a thin folder I had brought without knowing why. Maybe because some part of me had known the dinner would become unbearable. Maybe because my grandmother had trained me too well to walk into a financial room empty-handed. I placed it on the table. I'm not mixing them, I said. That's why I reviewed the project. Arthur's eyes moved to the folder. You reviewed Seabright Key? Yes. Daniel laughed, but it cracked halfway through. She skimmed a few papers I left at home. I slid the folder toward Arthur. I reviewed the coastal impact timeline, the consultant memo from April, the community access complaints, and the revised overrun projections. I also compared the budget Daniel presented to investors with the internal draft his team marked confidential. The words came out steadier than I felt. Arthur picked up the folder. The room waited. Daniel's face turned from pale to red. Claire, you don't know what you're talking about. That may be true, I said. But if it is, you can explain why the report says the permit review could delay construction 9 to 14 months, while your deck says 60 days. Arthur stopped reading and looked at Daniel. Daniel said nothing. I continued, and you can explain why the local access lawsuit is listed as resolved in your investor materials when the plaintiff group filed an amended claim 6 days ago. Patricia's eyebrows lifted. Mark murmured, Jesus. Evelyn hissed, Daniel. Arthur read for another minute. The page was reflected in his glasses. Then he lowered the folder and looked at me with an expression I had never received in Daniel's circle. Respect. Claire, he said, as controlling vote, are you prepared to approve Seabright Key? Daniel's shoulders loosened just slightly, as if he expected me to save him because wives always save the men who embarrass them. I looked at my husband. I remembered every dinner where he corrected me before I finished a sentence. Every party where he told strangers I was not a numbers person. Every time he took a document from my hand and said, I'll handle it. Every time I shrank because it was easier than being accused of overreacting. Then I thought of Grandma Ellie's handwriting. Use it without asking permission. Yes, I said. Daniel exhaled. With conditions. His eyes narrowed. Arthur did not blink. Name them. Independent environmental audit. Real consultation with local residents before construction. Full disclosure of pending litigation in revised investor materials. A locked contingency reserve for delay exposure. And Daniel is removed as executive lead. The room froze. Daniel stared at me as if I had slapped him in front of 12 people. What did you just say? I held his gaze. You heard me. His voice dropped. I built this project. You built a version of it that depended on people not asking questions. Evelyn rose from her chair. This is insane. You are letting some surprise inheritance make you vindictive. No, I said. I'm letting documented risk make me careful. Daniel leaned close enough that I could smell champagne on his breath. Claire, he whispered, you are humiliating me. I almost laughed then. Not because it was funny. Because after 3 years of public cruelty, he had the nerve to treat consequences like an assault. I said, loud enough for the table to hear, I learned from you that humiliation is acceptable when there's an audience. His mouth tightened. Arthur closed the folder. The conditions are aggressive, but they are not irrational. In fact, they may save the investment. Daniel turned on him. You can't be serious. Arthur's voice cooled. I'm very serious. This is my deal. No, Arthur said. It is a deal seeking approval from capital you do not control. For the first time that night, someone laughed at Daniel. It was small. A nervous sound from Mark, quickly swallowed. But Daniel heard it. We all did. The humiliation changed direction. Evelyn looked as if the chandelier had fallen onto the table. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat. There is another instruction from Mrs. Bennet. Daniel snapped, of course there is. The attorney did not react. In the event that Mrs. Kavanaugh's spouse attempts to pressure her regarding the transferred assets, the voting authority, or related marital documents, my firm is instructed to trigger immediate asset protection review and examine any marital agreements presented within the past 5 years. A cold line ran down my back. Grandma knew. Somehow, she had seen this coming. Maybe not the penthouse. Maybe not the exact insult. But she had known what certain men do when a woman they underestimate becomes inconvenient. Mr. Hayes looked at me. Mrs. Kavanaugh, has your husband presented any postnuptial agreement to you recently? Daniel's chair scraped backward. Don't answer that, he said. Every face turned toward him. Arthur's expression hardened. I opened my clutch again and removed the folded copy of the agreement Daniel had left on the kitchen island. Yes, I said. 3 weeks ago. Mr. Hayes took it from me. Daniel reached for it. The attorney stepped back. Do not touch this document. Daniel's hand stopped in the air. There it was. The second shift. The first was money. This was motive. I watched people understand it in real time. The jokes had not been random. The laughter had not been harmless. Daniel had spent years building a public case that I was financially incompetent. Then he tried to put papers in front of me that would give him control over money he suspected I might someday receive. Evelyn sat down slowly. I looked at her. You knew. Her eyes flicked away. It was barely a movement. But it was enough. My stomach turned. You knew about the post-nup. She pressed her lips together. Daniel said, Claire, stop. But I was not stopping. You both knew. Evelyn lifted her chin. I knew my son needed protection. Men like Daniel attract people who want things. I stared at her. I was his wife. You were a liability, she said. The words landed harder than the jokes because she did not decorate them. Arthur said her name sharply. Evelyn. But she was already bleeding truth. My son was on the edge of the biggest deal of his career, she said. And your grandmother had rumors around her estate. We weren't going to let some sheltered little girl stumble into power and ruin everything. Daniel closed his eyes. The room went silent. Evelyn realized too late that she had said too much. Mr. Hayes looked at me. Mrs. Kavanaugh, I recommend we leave now. Daniel moved toward me. I stood. He lowered his voice to the tone he used at home when nobody was watching. You walk out that door, don't expect to come back like nothing happened. I looked at him, really looked at him. The perfect suit. The perfect hair. The perfect man everybody thought was generous because he bought expensive wine and tipped valets with $100 bills. I had loved him once. Or I had loved the version he showed me before the wedding. The man who brought soup when I had the flu. The man who said my quietness made him feel peaceful. The man who told me I was safe with him. Maybe he existed. Maybe he was bait. Either way, I no longer owed him my confusion. Daniel, I said, for 3 years you told every room I was stupid so nobody would listen when I spoke. His jaw flexed. I removed my wedding ring. The diamond caught the chandelier light, throwing tiny sparks across the white tablecloth. He had chosen it himself. He said a ring should make a statement. I had not understood then that the statement was ownership. I placed it beside his untouched dessert spoon. Now they're listening. Then I walked out of Arthur Whitman's penthouse with my grandmother's attorney beside me, carrying $99 million, voting control over my husband's dream project, and the first clean breath I had taken in years. The elevator doors closed on Daniel calling my name. For once, I did not turn around. By 7:30 the next morning, Daniel had called 23 times. I knew because my phone kept lighting up on the nightstand in the guest suite of a hotel Mr. Hayes had arranged. I did not sleep. I sat by the window in a robe, watching Manhattan move below me while the city turned from black to blue to gray. The packet from Grandma Ellie lay open on the desk. Bank confirmation. Trust documents. Letter. Copies. Contact numbers. A life I did not know I had been walking toward. Her letter was 3 pages long. I read it at least 12 times. My dearest Claire, if this letter finds you in a room where someone has made you feel small, I am sorry I could not stand beside you sooner. But I hope you will feel me there now. You were never slow. You were never foolish. You were careful. There is a difference, and careless people rarely respect it. I built my life by listening when men assumed I was not listening. I watched them underestimate me at board tables, bank counters, estate meetings, and family dinners. The world will often mistake a quiet woman for an empty room. Let them. Empty rooms do not take notes. You always did. I did not tell you about the money because I wanted to know who loved you when they thought you had nothing to offer but yourself. I watched Daniel. I watched his mother. I hoped I was wrong. I was not. The rest of the letter explained the structure of the trust, the voting rights, and why she had requested public delivery. She wanted witnesses. She wanted Daniel's mask to slip in a room full of people whose money depended on truth. She had even left a line that made me cry so hard I had to press my sleeve to my mouth. If you cannot find your voice at first, use my paperwork until your voice comes back. At 8:04, Mr. Hayes arrived with coffee and a woman named Dana Ruiz, a financial attorney with sharp eyes and a soft voice. By 10, we were in a conference room overlooking Madison Avenue, reviewing the postnuptial agreement Daniel had given me. Dana read silently for 15 minutes, then looked up. This is not housekeeping. I know. It attempts to place your current and future separate assets under practical management by your spouse through marital efficiency language. It also includes a waiver that could have weakened your ability to challenge asset movement if he transferred funds through affiliated entities. I felt sick. Could it have worked? If you signed without counsel and he later pressured you into moving funds, it could have made unwinding things harder. Grandma thought he would do that. Dana's expression softened. Your grandmother understood patterns. Patterns. That word followed me for days. Daniel's mockery had been a pattern. His mother's contempt was a pattern. The way he interrupted me whenever I asked about money. The way he insisted I did not need passwords because he handled the boring stuff. The way he gave me a credit card with no limit but no real access to the accounts behind it. The way he said I could buy any dress I wanted but rolled his eyes when I asked about retirement statements. He did not want a helpless wife because he was generous. He wanted a helpless wife because helpless people are easy to rob. By noon, Arthur Whitman's office requested an emergency review call regarding Seabright Key. Mr. Hayes said I did not have to attend. Dana said I had every right to delay. But I thought of Daniel leaning across that dinner table, warning me not to make things weird. I joined the call. There were 9 people on the screen: Arthur, 2 attorneys, 3 investment officers, a risk consultant, Daniel, and Mark. Daniel looked like he had not slept either. His hair was perfect, but his eyes were swollen. Mark would not look at me. Arthur began. Claire, thank you for joining. After reviewing the material you provided, we agree a revised approval process is necessary. Daniel interrupted. This is a domestic dispute disguised as governance. Arthur's face did not change. Daniel, your wife flagged omissions that our team has now confirmed were not included in your investor deck. Because they were not material. The risk consultant spoke. They are material. Daniel stared at him. The man continued, the Coastal Review has a credible delay risk. The community access claim is not resolved. And the internal contingency estimates differ significantly from external presentation materials. For a moment, Daniel's camera froze, or maybe he did. Then his voice lowered. Claire, this is embarrassing for everyone. I leaned toward my laptop. No, Daniel. What happened last night was embarrassing. This is documentation. Arthur's mouth moved as if he almost smiled. The call lasted 2 hours. By the end, Daniel was temporarily removed as executive lead pending an independent review. Seabright Key was not killed. That mattered. I did not want revenge that destroyed jobs, communities, or investors who had trusted the process. I wanted sunlight. I wanted safeguards. I wanted the project to stop being Daniel's stage and start being a real business decision. But Daniel did not see it that way. At 2:17, he appeared in the lobby of my hotel. Security called up. Your husband is here, ma'am. He says it's urgent. My first instinct was to hide. That embarrassed me later, but it was true. Money did not erase 3 years of conditioning overnight. Part of me still expected to be scolded back into my role. Part of me heard his voice saying, "You're overreacting." Part of me wanted to apologize just to make the pressure stop. Dana looked at me from across the suite. You do not have to see him. I looked at Grandma Ellie's letter on the desk. If you cannot find your voice at first, use my paperwork. I'll see him in the hotel restaurant, I said. With you at the next table. Daniel arrived 10 minutes later wearing the same suit from the night before. That told me he had not gone home. Or maybe he had gone somewhere he could not explain. He saw Dana before he saw me, and irritation flickered across his face. Really, he said, sitting down. Lawyers now? I folded my hands in my lap. Yes. He gave a short laugh. This is insane. I waited. He leaned closer. My mother was wrong to say what she said. That's your opening? She was emotional. She called me a liability. She was trying to protect me. From your wife? He rubbed his face. Claire, do you understand what you did? You humiliated me in front of Arthur Whitman. I almost felt tired enough to laugh. You humiliated me in front of everyone. That was different. Why? Because it wasn't real. I stared at him. He said it with absolute sincerity. He truly believed that when pain belonged to me, it was performance. When consequences belonged to him, it was real. Daniel. I said, why did you want me to sign the post-nup? His expression closed. Because it was smart. For who? For us. No. Try again. His voice sharpened. Don't talk to me like I'm on trial. You are not on trial. Yet. That landed. He looked toward Dana, then back at me. You're being influenced by people who don't care about our marriage. Our marriage was in trouble before anyone else entered it. He softened then. He was good at that. His shoulders dropped, his eyes warmed, his voice lowered into the private register that used to make me feel chosen. I love you, he said. I know I've been an ass. I know I joked too much. But last night got out of control. Let's go home. We'll take a few days. We'll figure out the money and the trust together. You don't want to make permanent decisions while you're emotional. There it was. Emotional. The word men like Daniel use when a woman has evidence. I looked at his hands. Beautiful hands. Manicured. The hands that had held mine at our wedding. The hands that pressed against my back at dinner so I would stay quiet. The hands that reached for my grandmother's documents before I could read them. I'm not going home with you. His face hardened so fast it scared me. He caught it. But not quickly enough. Claire. No, you are my wife. I was your audience. His jaw worked. I stood. He reached for my wrist. Dana stood too. So did the hotel manager, who had been pretending to adjust menus near the bar. Daniel let go. That tiny public surrender told me everything. He knew exactly when to stop. He could control himself when consequences were visible. Which meant all the moments at home when he scared me. Cornered me, talked over me, made me doubt myself. Those were choices. I walked away shaking. That night, I opened a new notebook and wrote down every financial thing I could remember from my marriage. Accounts. Properties. Businesses. Dates. Documents. Conversations. Insults. Not because insults were financial evidence, but because they showed the pattern. Daniel had created an ecosystem where my ignorance was useful to him. He could claim control was kindness because everyone had been trained to see me as incompetent. At 1 a.m., I remembered the safe. It was in Daniel's home office behind a framed print of a sailboat. He once told me it only held passports and insurance papers. I knew the code because he used the same 4 digits for everything, his birthday month and year. He thought I never noticed. Men who think you are stupid get lazy. I called Dana in the morning. Can I legally access documents in my marital home? She asked questions, gave cautions, and arranged for a process server and an off-duty sheriff's deputy to accompany us. By then, she had already filed notices to preserve marital financial records. Daniel was served at his office. At 11:40, I entered my own home like a guest with permission. The house looked different. Same limestone entry. Same expensive rugs. Same abstract paintings Daniel said were investments, but chose because they matched the furniture. Yet it felt staged now, like a set where I had played the wife badly because I did not know I was allowed to leave the script. In Daniel's office, the safe opened on the first try. Inside were passports, yes. Insurance papers, yes. Also a folder labeled CB. My initials. Inside were copies of my grandmother's probate notices, printed emails between Daniel and a private investigator, and a handwritten note in Evelyn's script. Eleanor Bennett Estate, unclear value. Keep Claire calm until trust closes. Do not let her retain separate counsel. I read it 3 times. Not because I did not understand it. Because I did. Dana's face went still. The deputy looked away, giving me privacy he could not really give. There was more. A draft memo from Daniel's attorney discussing spousal cooperation strategy. A calendar reminder from 3 weeks earlier, get C to sign before WSP vote. A copy of the postnup with yellow tabs where my signature belonged. And then, at the bottom, a photograph. My grandmother on her porch, taken from across the street. My hand tightened around it. Daniel had watched her. Not personally, maybe. But he had paid someone to look into an old woman who loved me. He had known there might be money. He had known before he ever slid that document across the kitchen island. The grief that hit me then was strange. Not grief for my marriage. That had already cracked. It was grief for the version of my life where Daniel's cruelty might have been simple arrogance. Where maybe he mocked me because he was insecure. Where maybe Evelyn was just a snob. Where maybe the postnup was business paranoia. The folder killed every maybe. This was not a man who accidentally underestimated me. This was a man who studied how to use that underestimation. The second twist did not happen in a penthouse. It happened in a quiet office with dust in the safe and my grandmother's photograph in my hand. The real betrayal was not that Daniel laughed at me. It was that the laughter had been part of the plan. I filed for divorce 12 days later. Daniel responded by becoming exactly the kind of man he always claimed he was not. He called my parents in Ohio and told them I was having a breakdown. He texted my old college roommate and said I was being manipulated by attorneys. He sent flowers with a card that said, "Let's stop hurting each other," as if pain had been a team project. Then, when I did not answer, he leaked to a business gossip newsletter that his marriage was collapsing under sudden inheritance pressure and that friends were worried I had fallen under the influence of aggressive outside advisors. For 24 hours, I was humiliated again. Only this time, I did not stay quiet. Dana advised caution. Mr. Hayes advised strategy. Arthur advised nothing, but he sent a message that said, the truth tends to become cheaper if you wait, more expensive if you rush. So I waited 5 days. During those 5 days, the independent audit of Seabright Key began. The auditors found exactly what my little folder had suggested. Daniel's team had minimized regulatory delays, softened litigation language, and moved projected costs into future phases to make early returns look stronger. It was not a dramatic criminal fraud, not the kind that gets handcuffs on cable news. It was smoother than that. Richer. The kind of misconduct that hides in footnotes and confidence. But to investors, trust matters more than theater. Arthur called a special meeting. "Claire," he said, "you should attend in person." Daniel tried to block me. He failed. The meeting took place in a glass conference room downtown, 34 floors above the street. This time, I did not wear the dress Daniel chose. I wore a simple black suit Dana helped me pick and my grandmother's small gold watch. It did not match the room. That made me love it more. When I walked in, Daniel was already there with Evelyn beside him. She wore winter white and pearls, dressed like a woman attending a luncheon where someone else's life would be politely ruined. The sight of her made my stomach tighten, but I did not look away. Arthur sat at the head of the table. Mark was there. So were 2 outside attorneys, the audit lead, 3 investment committee members, and a representative from a community group in the Keys joining by video. Daniel looked at me and smiled sadly for the room. That old performance. "My wife," he said, "has been through a lot." I set my folder on the table. "Yes," I said. "And now so will your documents." His smile died. The audit lead presented 47 minutes of findings. Not dramatic. Worse. Precise. Timelines. Emails. Version histories. Marked up language changed from significant to manageable. Delay exposure moved from the central budget to an appendix. Community objections described as settled. despite ongoing claims. Daniel tried to interrupt 6 times. Arthur let him speak on the 7th. This is being exaggerated because of my wife's personal vendetta, Daniel said. Everyone knows what happened at dinner. She was embarrassed. I regret my tone, but this is not governance. This is revenge. I felt every eye move to me. For a second, the old fear rose. That they would believe him. That my voice would sound small. That I would stumble and become the woman he had described for years. Then I opened my folder. I have something to add. Dana nodded slightly. I placed copies of the safe documents on the table. This is a note written by Evelyn Kavanaugh before Daniel presented me with a postnuptial agreement. It says, keep Claire calm until trust closes. Do not let her retain separate counsel. This is Daniel's calendar reminder, get C to sign before WSP. Vote. This is a private investigator report on my grandmother's estate. This is a draft legal memo describing a spousal cooperation strategy. Evelyn's face went gray. Daniel whispered, where did you get those? Our safe, I said. In our home. Mark looked physically sick. The community representative on the screen said, are you telling us the same man who misrepresented our lawsuit tried to trick his wife into signing away her rights? No one answered. They did not have to. Daniel stood. This is privileged. Dana spoke for the first time. No. Some of it may become disputed, but you do not get to waive privilege over a handwritten note by your mother and a private investigator report kept in a marital safe. Evelyn turned to Daniel. Say something. He looked at her with pure rage. And there was the third twist, small but devastating. Daniel did not defend his mother. He blamed her. My mother pushed for the postnup, he said. She was concerned. I listened to bad advice. Evelyn stared at him. The woman who had laughed at me for years, who had called me a liability, who had helped him build the trap, suddenly discovered what it felt like to be useful until you were not. Daniel, she breathed. He would not look at her. She overstepped. He said. I was trying to protect the company. Evelyn's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I should not have enjoyed it. But I did. Not because I needed them to suffer forever. Because for 3 years they had stood shoulder to shoulder making me feel alone. Watching them turn on each other under the weight of their own choices was ugly, but it was also proof. People like that are loyal only while the lie is profitable. Arthur removed his glasses. Daniel Kavanaugh is terminated as executive lead on Seabright Key, effective immediately. His firm's role will be reviewed. All investor materials will be corrected. The project will proceed only under independent oversight and community consultation. Daniel's face twisted. Arthur, you can't just, I can, Arthur said. Then he looked at me. Claire, as controlling trust vote. Do you approve the revised oversight structure? Every person in that room waited. I thought about killing the project completely. For one hot second, I wanted to. I wanted to watch Daniel lose the thing he had valued more than my dignity. I wanted him to feel the floor disappear. But then I looked at the woman on the screen from the Keys. She had spoken earlier about public beach access, mangrove protection, storm drainage, and local jobs that did not vanish after construction. This was not just Daniel's trophy. It was a place where real people lived. My revenge could not become another rich person's tantrum. I approve the revised structure, I said. With written community access protections, independent environmental reporting, and a local advisory seat with real review power. The woman on the screen nodded. Arthur said, done. Daniel sat down as if his knees had failed. Evelyn stared at the table. I felt no thunder. No music. No movie ending. Just a deep, quiet release, like a door opening in a house that had been locked for years. The divorce took 9 months. Daniel fought everything until fighting made him look worse. He wanted the apartment. Then he wanted the Hamptons house. Then he wanted to challenge the trust. Then he wanted mediation. Then he wanted sympathy. Each version of him arrived dressed as a different man, but the eyes were always the same. In private, he begged. In filings, he attacked. In public, he performed sadness. At one hearing, his attorney suggested I had been financially passive during the marriage and therefore did not fully understand the documents at issue. Dana slid the postnuptial agreement across the table and asked Daniels' attorney to explain why a financially passive woman had identified 4 problematic clauses before signing. He changed topics. The court did not award Daniel any part of Grandma Ellie's trust. The marital property divided cleanly. Cleanly does not mean painlessly. It hurt to watch a marriage become spreadsheets. It hurt to see vacations reduced to credit card statements, gifts reduced to appraisals, years reduced to signatures. But there was also mercy in numbers. Numbers did not smirk. Numbers did not tell me I was too sensitive. Numbers did not ask me to laugh at my own humiliation. Numbers told the truth if you made them. Daniel tried one last time after the final hearing. He waited near the courthouse steps in a navy overcoat, looking tired in a way I might have mistaken for humility 1 year earlier. Claire. I stopped because I was no longer afraid of stopping. What? He looked at Dana standing 10 feet away, then back at me. I never knew who you really were. That sentence almost made me sad for him. Almost. Yes, you did, I said. You just thought you could make me forget. He swallowed. I loved you. No, I said. You loved being believed over me. The wind moved between us. Traffic hissed along the wet street. Somewhere behind me, courthouse doors opened and closed. Opened and closed, people entering and leaving the wreckage of their lives. Daniel looked smaller than he ever had at Arthur's table. I'm sorry, he said. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he meant he was sorry he lost. By then, I no longer needed to solve the difference. I hope you become someone who knows what that word costs, I said. Then I walked away. I did not see Evelyn again until 4 months later at a charity luncheon I had no interest in attending. Patricia Whitman invited me, and I went because the event supported legal aid for women facing economic abuse. I was standing near a table of silent auction items when Evelyn appeared beside me. She looked older. Not fragile. Women like Evelyn do not become fragile easily. But the sharpness around her mouth had softened into something less certain. Claire, she said. I did not smile. Evelyn. She held a glass of water with both hands. I wanted to say something to you. I waited. I was cruel. It was not enough. But it was true. Yes, I said. She flinched. I thought I was protecting my family, she continued. You were protecting control. Her eyes shone, though no tears fell. Daniel doesn't speak to me now. There it was. The real wound. I felt sorry for her for 1 second. Then I remembered the note. Keep Claire calm. Do not let her retain separate counsel. That must be painful, I said. She nodded, grateful for even that much. I added, but I am not the place where you get absolution. Her face tightened. Then she nodded again, slower. I suppose not. She walked away with the same straight back she had at the penthouse, but without the victory in it. I watched her go and felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Distance. That was better. With part of Grandma Ellie's money, I bought her old house in Dayton from the family who had purchased it after she died. The porch swing was gone. The tomato beds were weeds. The blue paint had been covered with beige. I stood in the empty living room and cried so hard the realtor pretended to check something in the kitchen. I did not move there full time. My work had grown in New York. And the trust required me in meetings more often than I expected. But I restored the house. I painted the swing blue again. I planted tomatoes. I kept her kitchen table because the family had stored it in the basement. Its surface was scratched and uneven, with a tiny burn mark from a pan she once set down too quickly. That table became the first table of the Eleanor Fund. It started with 6 women. A nurse whose husband kept all passwords and gave her cash in envelopes. A stay-at-home mother of 3 who had never seen a tax return in 11 years of marriage. A small business owner whose boyfriend convinced her to put him on her accounts. A retired teacher whose adult son was pressuring her to sign property papers. A waitress hiding bank statements in her car. A lawyer who whispered, I should have known better, as if education vaccinates anyone against manipulation. We met in Grandma's living room with coffee, legal pads, and a volunteer financial counselor. No judgment. No shame. No jokes. If someone asked what a trust was, we explained it. If someone asked how credit worked, we explained it. If someone cried because she did not know where to begin, we began with one paper. Then one more. Then one more. The fund grew. By the end of the first year, we had helped 200 women review contracts. Open independent accounts, find attorneys, document coercion, and learn the language of their own lives. I did not save anyone. I hated when newspapers tried to write it that way. Women are not helpless because somebody hid the map. They are trapped because somebody benefits from them not having it. We gave them maps. The first time I spoke publicly about my marriage, I carried Grandma's letter in my purse. The auditorium was full of women, some in business suits, some in scrubs, some with babies sleeping against their shoulders. I stood at the podium and saw myself in too many faces. For years, I told them, I thought being quiet made me weak. But sometimes a quiet woman is not empty. Sometimes she is taking notes. Nobody laughed. Some women cried. I did too. After the talk, a girl of about 19 approached me. She had a backpack and red eyes. She said her boyfriend kept telling her she was bad with money and should let him manage her student refund. She asked if that sounded wrong. I thought of Daniel's hand on my back. Yes, I said. It sounds wrong. She opened her backpack and pulled out folded papers. Can you look at these? I smiled through the ache in my throat. Yes, I said. Let's look together. Seabright Key survived. Not Daniel's version. A better one. The marina was scaled down. The public access path was preserved. The mangrove buffer expanded. The local advisory seat became permanent. The new executive lead was a woman named Rachel Monroe, a former urban planning attorney who had no patience for glossy nonsense. The project made less money on paper in the first year and became safer over 10. Arthur called that adult math. At the final approval meeting, I sat at the long table wearing Grandma's watch. Daniel was there as an observer because his remaining firm interest had not yet been fully unwound. He sat near the wall, no vote, no microphone, no jokes. When Rachel finished presenting, the room approved the revised plan. Arthur looked at me. Claire? I voted yes. Not for Daniel. Not for revenge. For the version of power Grandma Ellie wanted me to understand. Power was not making everyone feel as small as they made you. Power was refusing to become careless just because you finally had the upper hand. After the meeting, Daniel approached me in the hallway. He looked at the folder in my arms. Still reading everything slowly, he asked. For a second, the old Daniel flashed through. The smirk. The muscle memory of cruelty. Then he seemed to hear himself. His face fell. I looked at him calmly. Yes, I said. That's why I keep finding what you missed. He stepped back. I never saw him again outside legal correspondence. Now I live between New York and Dayton. My New York apartment has floor-to-ceiling windows, but I like Grandma's little brick house better. In the spring, the porch smells like rain and tomato leaves. In the kitchen, I keep a framed copy of her letter beside a photograph of her wearing gardening gloves, squinting at the sun like she was arguing with it. Every few weeks, a woman sits at her table and tells me a story that starts the way mine did. He says I'm stupid with money. He says he's protecting me. He says I don't need to read it. He says I'm emotional. He says I should trust him. Every time, I slide a legal pad across the table and hand her a pen. Start with what you know, I tell her. Because that is where power begins. Not with $99 million. Not with a lawyer walking into a penthouse. Not with a billionaire investor suddenly taking you seriously. Power begins the moment you stop laughing at the joke that is breaking you. People still ask me about that night. They want the cinematic version. The champagne. The stunned faces. The envelope. The number. They want to hear how my husband called me too dumb for $1 and then had to watch me inherit $99 million before dessert. I tell them that part. It is satisfying. But it is not the real story. The real story is quieter. It is a woman sitting at a dinner table with cold fish on her plate, realizing that silence has protected everyone except herself. It is a grandmother who understood that love sometimes means leaving behind documents sharp enough to cut through lies. It is a room full of powerful people discovering that the woman they dismissed had been reading all along. And it is me, years later, standing on a porch in Ohio with blue paint under my fingernails, watching tomatoes grow in straight lines because Grandma Ellie taught me that even wild things need stakes until they are strong enough to stand. Daniel thought my value appeared the night the money arrived. He was wrong. The money only made the room quiet enough for everyone else to hear what had been true the whole time. I was never the joke. I was the witness. And when the time came, I had receipts.